Good afternoon, everyone. I see people are joining, hopping in. Welcome to this week's Saddleback webinar. I'm Liz Mangus, Literacy Specialist for Saddleback Educational Publishing, and we will get started right at 3 o'clock Eastern Time. Until then, make yourselves comfortable, make yourselves at home, locate your control bar at the bottom of the web browser window. If you're not familiar with Zoom webinar, there are two things that you need to be focused on. You need to find the chat area and you need to find the Q&A area. This is how you're going to communicate with us today. We want you to be able to interact with each other and chat and share your thoughts and expertise and ask questions when you need to. So when you want to interact with your fellow attendees, please make sure that you go to the chat area. And then whenever you enter in whatever it is you want to say, make sure that you go to that drop-down menu and choose all panelists and attendees. If you want everybody to see what you're sharing, you have to choose all panelists and attendees from that drop-down. Otherwise, the message will just come to me and Valentina. So please make sure you're aware of that. Now, as we go along today, if you have questions, either for our panelist or for Saddleback, please use the Q&A area for that. That's where we'll be able to help you with any questions that you have today. Please be aware that we will use the chat area. Periodically, we will drop a link to resources from this webinar. So if you're looking for resources, you want to know, hey, are there handouts? Are there links? Is there a certificate of attendance? Yes, there is. We're going to drop a link in the chat area for you periodically to be able to access those items. And when you click on that link, it should download to your downloads folder, and you should be able to open up that folder straight away and get to those files. So that's where you'll be able to find all of our materials from today. You will receive a recording of this webinar tomorrow. So you will receive a follow-up email with the recording and all of the links tomorrow, about 24 hours after we conclude our webinar today. While we're waiting, we do this every week, so I hope you have your Twitter accounts ready. Here is the Twitter information for both Saddleback and our speaker today, Valentina. Please follow us. Go there right now. Let everybody know that you're here. Take a nice picture of your computer. Let everybody know. Blast it out. We want everybody to hop on and join us today because we have some great information. And we just think you probably have a lot of colleagues who want to be here who might not know about it. So you can help us out by letting them know that you're joining us today. We'll get started in just a few minutes, but until then, let's say hi to Valentina. Welcome, Valentina. How are you? Thank you for being here.
Oh, thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here. I'm doing well here in Texas where the weather is hot and warm.
This is the first time in quite a while where my fellow panelist is also here in Texas. We're not too far from each other, so we're sharing in the same sort of summer doldrums with the weather here. But before you know it, it will be cold and we'll be maybe complaining about that. So we just take every day as it comes and try to be positive. So let me open up the chat here and see how everybody's doing. Welcome, Louisville, Texas, North Carolina. Chesapeake Public Schools is here. Canada, welcome. Hello, oh, unseasonably hot in Massachusetts as well, so we are not alone. North Carolina, we just have, this is the best part for me. I love seeing all the people hopping. Yeah, we have a few people jumping in from Massachusetts saying it's not, it's abnormally hot here and they are not enjoying that. So sorry about that, Massachusetts, but you know, we feel your pain. Pennsylvania, Oklahoma, very hot in Maryland, okay. Capital region of New York, Louisville, Kentucky, Ohio, Montgomery, Texas. That's not too terribly far from you, Valentina.
Yep, a neighbor.
A neighbor, yes. Okay, who else have we got here? Michigan, Northern California, Cincinnati. I've only, Houston, hi Susan. Houston is in the house here. Chicago, West Palm Beach, welcome. Burlington, Vermont, Nevada, New Jersey. So, oh, Seattle, good. We have Pacific Northwest represented. Great. Welcome, everybody. We are so glad you are here. You are going to love Valentina. If you don't already know Valentina, you're going to love her because she's just got such a passion and for what she does and has such great information and great perspective. So we really appreciate you joining us today for this learning session. It is 3 o'clock. That means it is time to officially begin. So let's officially introduce you to Valentina Gonzalez. Our topic today is creating a culturally responsive learning environment. I know this is on a lot of people's minds. We're entering into a very unusual school year, and we want to make sure that we have the best learning environment and relationships possible for our students, especially given the circumstances in the world today. We want to try to create some positivity and stability. So Valentina, welcome. Let me tell everybody a little bit about you. So Valentina's passion and love for education is widely known and shines through in her presentations and her writing. Her personal experience as an immigrant from Yugoslavia and a language learner fuels her desire to advocate for English learners and support teachers with best research-based teaching methods. In her 21 years with public education, Valentina has served as a classroom teacher, an ESL co-teacher and pull-out teacher, a district ESL facilitator, and a district professional development specialist for teachers of English learners. She's done it all, ladies and gentlemen. Through these roles, she supported students and educators and coached teachers on sheltered instruction and ESL strategies. She has been asked to present at the state and national levels, and she is here with us today. She's currently an educational consultant with Seidlitz Education, if you didn't know that. And if you don't know Seidlitz, make sure you check out their website. They offer a lot of great tools and resources. Thank you so much for being here. I'm going to turn it over to you. Thanks, everybody. I'll be monitoring the chat, and we'll check back in after Valentina concludes.
Thank you so much, Liz. I really appreciate that. I'm going to do some screen sharing, and if you'll just be patient with me while I navigate this screen share, I would appreciate that. That introduction really was very sweet. I appreciate it so much. And I really love culturally responsive teaching, and this is a topic that's truly near and dear to my heart. So I'm honored that I get to share this with you all. Like Liz said, my family immigrated here from the former Yugoslavia back when I was just a toddler myself. So coming here was definitely a culture shock for us. My family didn't speak any English when we came here. My parents were a young married couple. They had 2 toddlers in hand, and they didn't have a job lined up. So coming here was a choice they made to have a better future and a better life for their family and for my brother and me. They wanted us to have a better education. They wanted us to grow up in a nation, in a world where we could have a great life for our own kids, and jobs, and neighbors that loved one another. And that's why we came to America when we did. It wasn't because my dad had a job lined up, or because we had a lot of family already here. We took a huge leap of faith. And so when we came to America and started learning English in elementary school, my brother and I really had a difficult time. That experience in itself helped me to understand what I wanted to do when I graduated from high school and went on to college and became a teacher. I share that little bit of my story with you because, not because I think it's super special, but in all honesty, because it is actually more prevalent today than it was back then. And in our nation, over 10% of our public school students are English learners. We have over 400 languages spoken in the United States. This story happens more today than it did over 40 years ago when I came to America. it's even more important now for us to be culturally responsive educators and to know how to serve not only our English learners, but all students, and assure that they are in safe and comfortable environments in their classrooms that are conducive to learning academics and possibly learning a second language or a third language. So I want to ask you, what comes to your mind when you think of culturally responsive teaching? Because sometimes these are buzzwords that we hear and they're really not quantified. They're really not explained or discussed in depth. So when you think of culturally responsive teaching, which of these images comes to your mind? And you can type in the chat. And when you choose an image, tell me why. So I've given you a sentence stem, like I chose image A, B, C, or D because. So if you'll just go ahead and type into the chat, and I'm going to read some of these as you type them. Let's see, what are we thinking? I chose D because diversity training. I chose C because it looks like it's determined. I chose C because I'm successful with it. But all these images are white people, so maybe a trick question. Good point. I chose C because we can do this. I chose C because culturally responsive educators are ready to take action. I love this. These are really great. I love these points of view. There is no right or wrong answer when you're interpreting these images and why you chose them. Very good responses. So one thing I want to just put out there from the beginning is that culturally responsive teaching is not about a one-day event. It's not about celebrating, one-time events here and there for a certain culture. That's a good step in the right direction. And I know a lot of us are already doing things like that. And I'm not saying we shouldn't, but that's not in essence what culturally responsive teaching is. When we think of culturally responsive teaching and creating a culturally responsive environment, it's more about the daily practices that we do in our classrooms that bring students' culture into the instruction. When we value each student and what they bring to the table, and we teach them as people first, and we really maximize their potential as contributors in our classroom. And this can be said about the families as well, bringing their families' cultures into our instruction, valuing our families for what they bring to the table, and making sure that we're maximizing our families' potentials in our students' education as well. So really embracing all of their assets and capitalizing on what students and families are bringing. So key in culturally responsive teaching is, first and foremost, using students' cultural experiences in daily instruction. And in order to do that, we have to know our kids. We have to know them individually. We can't use their cultural experiences without truly knowing our students. Secondly, embracing native language and students' families as assets. Kids need to know if they speak another language, if they know another language, that is an asset in itself, and it is encouraged and invited in our environment. Third, creating a classroom environment that represents and respects all students. So when I look around my classroom, I see myself, I see my friends, I see my colleagues and classmates, and I know that I value what I see in this classroom. And finally, communicating clear and high expectations for everyone. We set the ceiling for our kids. We set the ceiling, and it can either be a very high ceiling or a very low one, and they will rise to the occasion. They will rise to either the low one or they'll rise to the high one. So we have to set that ceiling very high for all of those students. And if they need scaffolds and accommodations to reach it, then we provide those. But set those expectations high for all kiddos. One of my favorite authors and researchers on culturally responsive teaching is Zaretta Hammond. And she says that the neuroscience tells us that when the brain feels safe and relaxed, the brain is connected to people that trust and treat us well. But if we don't trust and know that we're being treated well, then we can't feel safe and relaxed. And so this applies really naturally to students in our classrooms. If our students are not feeling safe in the classroom, if they are not feeling that they trust their classmates and their teachers, then the brain is not going to feel that it is safe, it cannot relax, and it cannot take in new information. The brain will not allow academics and language to progress. So this is really important for us as educators, whether we are ESL teachers or general education teachers. We can capitalize on this information. We can leverage this and know that the environment we create can either help language progress or stifle language development, as well as academic development. So one key thing we have to do in order to create that culturally responsive environment, whether we are teaching virtually or we're teaching in a brick and mortar setting, is tap into our students' culture. First and foremost, we have to get to know our kids and build those relationships by tapping into their culture. Know who they are, what their passions are, what they do at home, how their family works. And we do this by understanding that each family has its own culture. No matter if our students are new to the country or if our students are born here in the United States, if they're in the ESL program, all of our students and all of us have culture. One of my favorite authors, Dr. Michelle Izquierdo, wrote the book Pathways to Greatness for ELL Newcomers. And she says that culture is the sum of social behaviors and norms that distinguish one group of people from another. In order to truly tap into our students' cultures, we have to understand where they're coming from and why they do the things they do, and embrace their culture and understand that the reason our students and families do what they do or interact with us the way they do is because of their culture. So a lot of us have probably seen the cultural iceberg, and it's a great representation of culture. One thing that often happens is we tend to focus more on surface culture. What families eat, the music that they listen to, the clothing that they wear, the festivals, their language. But in order to truly tap into families and students' culture, knowing their deep culture is going to be where we make the biggest impact. When we understand deep culture, this is what's going to make a true impact on how we interact with our students and our families, and creating that culturally responsive environment in our classrooms. The deep culture is going to help us interact better with our students and our families. This is where communications of style and rules plays a part, concepts of time and family, relationships in gender and authority, notions of leadership and friendship and beauty, attitudes towards rules, and attitudes towards age and work. These things all differ from culture to culture. Approaches towards marriage and religion and raising children. Deep culture is where we're going to make the biggest impact as we're getting to know our students and our families. Now you might be wondering, well, how am I going to know this deep culture? How am I going to get to know my students and my family's deep culture? All of this is tied into our students' identities. And in order to find out more about our students, we can amplify their voice by reducing our footprint, our teacher talk, and amplifying their footprint, their student talk. We can learn more about them and their families. So providing a safe time and space for students to share in either breakout rooms, or if we're in a brick and mortar setting, providing space for students to communicate with one another, with partners or in groups, ensuring that we're giving them a choice in reading and writing and products so that they have more autonomy in the work in the classroom. And then focusing on students, listening more when they talk, when they share, truly listening to what they have to say. These are some key ways to get to know our students and their passions and where they're coming from. So we want to affirm their cultures. We want to validate what they're coming to the table with and honor their culture as well. I know many of my students in the past have come to class with books in their home languages. And one way to honor their home language is to let them read in their home language or ask them to read aloud to the class in their home language. And it just gives them that sense of pride that we want them to have, and we want other kids to see that, you know, this is a great thing to be bilingual, to know another language. We want our kids to feel proud of who they are, feel proud that they have this culture, that we all are different, and being different is a good thing. So the next thing that we want to highlight as we're making a culturally responsive environment for our classroom, whether it is online or it is in a brick and mortar setting, we're going to survey the actual environment. We're going to take a look at the walls and the space and ensure that it is representative of the students that we have. We're going to look at what is valued in this classroom, because the things that are on our physical space, this is what we value. And our kids can see that, and families can see that when they walk in as well. So are we placing student work on the walls? Are we highlighting student writing and artwork? And if we have posters on the walls, do they represent the demographics of our classroom as well? And one key factor is taking a deep look at our bookshelves. This is really important for all of our kids, but especially for our English learners and our students who are marginalized. We want our students to engage in books. Books hold value. That this is where our students are going to learn a great deal of vocabulary, but if they don't connect with the books that they're reading, they're less likely to continue reading and find a love of reading. So taking a look at the books on your bookshelves and in your classroom and on your campus to make sure that they do match up with your student demographics is going to be key. I actually did this a few years ago because I saw a research on how many books represent white students versus Hispanic students and Asian students, and how many books have characters that are just animals or inanimate objects. And I was appalled. And I thought, there's no way my bookshelf is like this. Well, I audited my bookshelf, and I was really disappointed at how my bookshelf fared. I didn't have a bookshelf that represented my students. And it was at that moment that I took action. As soon as my district started providing extra funds, I allocated that money to buying books that were representative of the students in my classroom and on our campus too. And I made sure to include books in our primary languages. So our top 10 languages on our campus, I made sure that I hooked up with my librarian and we bought books for our library in our primary languages. And those were wildly popular books. Even our native English speakers wanted to see those books and wanted to get their hands on them. We want books that are mirrors for our students they can see themselves in, but also windows where they can see others and others' experiences. This is a great opportunity to build empathy in our classrooms. And in this day and age, it's really important for us to work hard at building community and building empathy and connecting students with one another. And books, this is the best place for us to start that important work with our kiddos, younger and older. This is another example. This is in the front office of a campus. And this is really important because when our families walk into our campus or our classroom, we want them to also feel welcome. And a lot of times when our families that don't speak English yet walk into the front office and have a difficult time communicating, they can instantly feel like they don't belong. And that can be a really difficult feeling and may affect whether or not they want to come back. So creating a bulletin board with your top 5 to 10 languages on it at the front office or in your classroom can instantly help your families feel more welcome. So on this bulletin board, as you can see at the top, it says welcome in many languages. And then on the top, it has English. It says, how may I help you? What language do you speak? What is your child's name? What is your name? And so on. And then it has the same statements in Bengali, Arabic, Spanish, Urdu, Russian, and I believe that one is Albanian. So this way, when parents walk in, if they speak a language that's listed here, they can point to it in their language and you can know what it says in English. Real quick way to make families feel super welcome, but we want our walls to be representative of the families and students in the building as well. So not just in our classroom, but throughout the campus as well. The next thing I want to share about culturally responsive environments is that it's important we create student-centered instruction. So this means that we become more facilitators in the classroom and students take ownership of the learning journey. This might mean that we create a morning meeting. This builds community within the classroom, and it can be done face-to-face or online. So you can see in this example, the teacher has created a large circle in the classroom, and they're going to gather together and hold their morning meeting. Morning meetings can also be done online. So you set a certain time and date for your morning meetings. Everyone gathers at the same time, and we get together to discuss how things are going, how's everyone feeling. We might, if it's a primary grade, we might sing a song together. If it's an older grade, we might read a poem. We might have a common question we discuss, and so on. Morning meetings help to build that community of learners in a common area. Student-centered classrooms are going to have cooperative learning environments. So we're going to work together in teams, face-to-face or online. And even in this day and age when during face-to-face classrooms, we still might have to be physically spaced apart, we're still going to have cooperative learning set up. So if we're in a physical classroom, but we can't sit close together, we're still going to create learning assignments and learning activities where students are cooperatively working together to achieve a common goal. So it might be that everyone is working on their computer on a Padlet or a book creator or some task so that everyone is contributing to an assignment. Online, it might look like breakout rooms, and we're still discussing and sharing information together. And finally, we are incorporating games. Games are great ways to get kids engaged and participating together while having fun and learning at the same time. Zaretta Hammond mentions three practical ways to make any lesson more culturally responsive. Gamify, so adding games to instruction. Storify, which means add stories, either your own or letting kids tell stories, and make it social. And so you can see that actually all three of these do just that. Gamify, make it social, and storify. We're allowing kids to add their own story or share their own kind of narrative about what's happening in their day or what's happening during their morning, their weekend, having a little bit of an open discussion. The important thing is when we're creating that student-centered classroom environment is that we're embracing acculturation in our environment. We want students to feel that they belong just the way they are. They don't have to change to be part of this classroom. They don't have to change who they are. We don't want kids to feel that they have to fit in or be like everybody else. And this is a real big struggle for many kids, especially for students who are newcomers or students who are English learners and feel like they have to fit in to be like the rest of the kids. I'll tell you from my own personal experience, that was me in junior high. Junior high those years are really difficult years for kids because there's that, social idea that we have to be like everybody else and we're struggling to fit in. But in reality, we want our kids to be empowered by their uniqueness. We want them to know that your power is being different. If there's one thing I could tell myself, my young self, my junior high self, is that being different is your superpower. And so now when I work with kids, especially those kids from 4th to 8th grade, I tell them, if you speak another language, if you're from a different country, if you're different, which we all are, that's your superpower. Embrace it and be so proud of it. Don't try to be like everybody else. That's boring. And that's what we want our kids to learn to feel from such a young age and never let go of. Next thing we have to embrace as culturally responsive teachers and in a culturally responsive environment is how important names are. Names are tied directly to our identity, and pronouncing them is critical for our students. So one thing we can do is ask our kids at the beginning of the year to video themselves on Flipgrid or whatever other platform you might be using, and ask them to tell us how they like to be called. Share their name with us, and we can play that over and over again, and their classmates can too. This is one way that we can really ensure that we're pronouncing our kids' names correctly. Years ago, I happened to be in a classroom where the teacher loved to call kids by nicknames that the teacher made up. And this is probably something I would say try not to do, especially for our kids who are English learners or our kids who are going into those awkward middle grade years when there may be some teasing going on, especially with names. So ask kids what they like to be called, stick to their names the way they like to be pronounced. Even if you have to ask them several times, how do you like to be called? Can you tell me again how to pronounce your name? Did I pronounce it correctly? At least they know that you care enough to call them by their name. If you're not sure how to pronounce a student's name correctly, definitely ask the kid or the parent. There are kids who will go a day or even more days without hearing their name because maybe we're not sure how to pronounce it or we're afraid we're going to say it wrong. Instead, just ask. Just ask. They'd rather know you care enough. So I want you to think for a moment about your own name, because I know we all have name stories ourselves, something about our name that either makes us feel special or a memory about our name that may be something sad or hurtful, a time when your name was mispronounced, or the meaning of your name. And if you'll type into the chat, if you'd like to share it, only if you'd like to share anything about your name. Just a quick something. Oh, your name's meaning is soul. I love that. I love my name, and while you're typing, I'll tell you a quick story about why I love my name. My father named me Valentina after the first female Russian cosmonaut. And he named me Valentina after the first female Russian cosmonaut because she paved the way and she did great things. And I think that's such a special name because my dad picked it for me. My name means heaven. Wow, look at all of that. I love Vera. Oh, Vera. Oh, yes. Vera was my grandmother's name. I love that. Names have meaning. Names are tied to our identities, and our kids have it too. So be sure to value that with your students as well. You can continue to type about your names because I see the passion and love you have. I'd like to share with you our next idea about culturally responsive environments. And this is learning a few words in students' primary languages. It doesn't take a lot of effort, but it can mean a lot to a kid, especially a kid who is new to our country, a kid who is learning English. When they walk in and see a word in their primary language, this can feel so welcoming. Just imagine if you moved to a new country where you didn't speak the language and you saw a word in your primary language. Imagine how you would feel. It's just so welcoming and validating to see something you know, and it makes you feel honored. We want to honor and validate our students for who they are and what they come with. This example on the side is from teaching grade 1. I have to give a shout out to this teacher. She gave me permission to share this picture. She's on Twitter, and she shared how she created an affirmation station in English and in Spanish. and students can walk up. She teaches both students who speak English and Spanish, and she wanted them to see the words in both languages. So she has them in both languages here. My point is that no matter what languages your students speak, we're validating what they come to us with. We're capitalizing on their language repertoires, and we're just learning a few words to help them feel validated and honored. Primary language is important to our students' identities. And so making room for that is going to make a huge difference in how they learn academics and how welcome they feel in our classrooms. The more welcome they feel, the safer they're going to feel, the more they're going to trust us, and the more they're going to learn. So this investment is going to be huge. We're going to make sure that our students know that their primary language is an asset. And we're not just going to say your primary language is an asset. We're going to quantify it by learning a few words and posting them on the wall. Welcome, hello, thank you. Whatever words we can, we're going to share those words with our students. And guess what? The rest of the class, maybe our students who speak English only, can also learn a few words, or they can see that language is valued here, that cultures are valued here, that people are valued here. And that is a beautiful thing. We're building love and empathy, and we're building a community. And who can say no to that? That's what we want. That is what we want. The next idea is that we're going to communicate goals with students. We're going to communicate what we want students to know and be able to do. We're not just going to write it in our lesson plans. Students are going to know what their goals are. This is really important for our English learners. Our English learners are bombarded with so much information on a daily basis. They are hearing their classmates talk. They're seeing the environmental print all over the walls. There's just so much going on that when we communicate those goals to them, we're narrowing the focus. I've always said that content and language objectives are like writing a grocery list. When I go to the grocery store and I have a list written out, I know exactly what I should get at the grocery store. I go in with a purpose, and I even go in systematically and get what I need. And at the end, before I get to the register, I check my list. And I'm very metacognitive about what I do if I didn't get what I needed. The same thing happens with our students when we communicate the goals with them. They know what they need to get out of the lesson, and they're paying attention during the lesson to get those things. And at the end of the lesson, we review those goals. And I teach them to be metacognitive. If you didn't get it this time, what will you do? Will you ask for help? Will you reread your notes? Will you talk about it with your parents? What are your choices? And what will you do? Because you're part of this learning journey. You're part of this. So you have to know what your options are and what to do next. We have to communicate these goals to our students. Communicate those content and language objectives and individualize our goal setting with our English learners. Small chunks, but make sure that our students know what they need to achieve and set those goals high. We don't want to simplify the lesson for them. We want to amplify it. We want to make sure that they are getting grade level curriculum with support. And I want to show you an excellent example of amplifying, not simplifying. Huge shout out to Carmen Wynn. Carmen Wynn did an amazing job of taking grade level curriculum here, this is the original text, and adapting it. The other day, Larry Ferlazzo shared this, and he called it engineering the text. Love that, because it is totally engineered. It's not simplified. This is the same information. It's engineered so that now our English learners are still learning the same content, but it's so scaffolded and accommodated that our students will be able to access the information. Thank you, Carmen, for letting me share that with our viewers. The next idea is that we're going to embrace an asset-based mindset. We're going to come from a place of understanding that our students and families are coming to us with great assets, not deficits. We're not fixing something here. We're not fixing anything. What we're doing is adding to what they have. They have so much that they're bringing to the table. We are not fixing them. We're adding to their repertoire. And so with an assets-based mindset, we're recognizing that these students are coming to us with first languages, with traditions from their home, things that their families do on a daily basis, their own cultures, experiences that we need to learn about. They have their own beliefs. They have valuable background knowledge. We have to tap into it. These are things that we need to learn about so that we can capitalize and leverage this information in our academic classroom. But the key here is that our minds have to be flexible. You know, if we're going into remote learning or not, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what our seating looks like, what our classrooms look like, where we're teaching and learning from. The key is that our mind has to be flexible. We have to take a mindset that understands that not everyone has the same culture or perspective that we do. Our mind is the one that has to be flexible. Because in essence, we all see the world through our own cultural lenses. Everyone does, our kids, our colleagues, our families. And those experiences that we have shape the way we think and act. Your experiences shape and think the way you teach. Our kids' experiences shape and mold the way that they act in our classrooms. And the more lenses we see through, the better we can create culturally responsive classrooms. We need more lenses. We need to look through more lenses, attend more events throughout our community so we see what our families see. Visit their communities. Go to different restaurants. Have experiences that we don't normally have. The more lenses we have, the better we will be as educators of kids that are coming to us with varied culture and tradition. One of my favorite educators, Cornelius Minor, talks a lot about cultural proficiency and culturally responsive teaching. And he says that we have to invest time in this. It's not something that's going to happen overnight. We can't buy culturally responsive teaching in a program or a box. There's no easy way, there's no shortcut. It just takes a lot of time and reflection, and we're always working at it. We have to examine what we're doing on a daily basis, each of us internally. No one's perfect at it. We're all growing. And it's not something that's going to happen overnight. Culturally relevant teaching, it's a pedagogy. It's not a strategy. All of the things I've shared with you come from mindsets, approaches that we take on a daily basis that help to empower students intellectually, socially, emotionally, by using cultural reference to help students increase their academics and linguistics. So I want you to think. I just want you to self-reflect, and if you want to type into the chat, you can. But take a moment to reflect on your own self. What are your expectations for student participation in the classroom? What do you think the teacher's role is in education and in the classroom? I see some answers rolling in. And, you know, the thing is that we all see these answers through our own cultural lenses. And our students and families come to us with their own ideas of culture in the classroom as well. Here are a few more questions for you. Do you expect students to work independently or cooperatively? And how do you determine that? Here's one more question. How do you feel about punctuality? I can see these answers rolling in. And as you reflect on your answers to these, I want you to remember that your answers are based on your culture and the way that you were raised, how you went to school. And our students may not have the same beliefs. Our parents, that our families may not have the same beliefs. So as we're working with students and they're late, or our families are late to a parent meeting, or our kids are not working cooperatively, think about where they're coming from and why they may not be doing what we think they should be doing. Culture plays a part, and culturally responsive teaching is valuing and incorporating our students' cultures in daily instruction, not our culture, but our students' cultures into daily instruction. We're helping to ensure that their voices and their experiences are embedded into daily instruction. So in school, here are some practical ideas that we can keep in mind, and many of these are in the book Pathways to Greatness by Michelle Izquierdo. We're going to ensure that diversity is recognized and is really embedded in meetings and planning time. So it's discussed throughout. That activities and events honor all cultures, and they're not just towards one culture solely. That our cultures are represented around the schools and hallways, like we mentioned before. Books and materials in native languages. That we're seeing maps and flags and symbols of our students' home cultures displayed and used in the classroom. Students' holidays are discussed and celebrated. Recently, I saw an idea, I don't remember if it was on a Facebook group or Twitter, but someone mentioned that they asked families to fill out a calendar with all of the holidays they celebrate. So we're not just looking to see all the holidays that are celebrated. We're asking families to fill out a calendar. Now we're really being culturally responsive towards the families we serve. Love that idea. And multiculturalism and diversity is seen as an asset and incorporated in lessons. As the teacher, we're using cultural knowledge and experiences to make learning appropriate and effective, and teaches students to know and praise their own cultural heritage. So we're really empowering kids as cultural beings, and we're making sure that they know how important this is. So getting to know our students beyond surface culture, but truly that deep culture. Attending neighborhood events and local events. And understanding our own biases and our own cultural competence and how that plays a part in instruction. So as we go into the next school year, and we may be faced with distance learning, we want to keep a pulse on how COVID-19 and this has affected our kids socially and emotionally, and the importance of keeping connected with our students and families. Sometimes you hear this as social distancing, but really it's physical distancing. We don't want to be socially distant. We have to be physically distant. We have to keep separated physically from each other, but we don't want to be socially distant from each other. So we can keep in touch using technology and stay social with our kids and our families. One of my absolute favorite researchers and writers, Dr. Brene Brown, says that we are all hardwired for connection. And without it, there is suffering. This is true in normal circumstances, but if we're in virtual learning settings, this is even more important. We have to stay connected with our kids and families. This is going to be so important for us in the fall if our families are learning virtually and we're having to stay separated. Distance learning means we're going to have to keep in mind the empathy, ensuring that our families have what they need physically and emotionally first and foremost. How are they doing? And then we worry about the academics. Give them multiple entry points to instruction and meet them where they are. I know you've heard this many times, but less is more when it comes to distance learning. We can't do as much when it's virtual. We're going to have to pick and choose what's most important and keep safety at the forefront when it comes to technology and the devices our kids are using. Prioritize that curriculum because we're not going to be able to fit it all in. So I'm going to share with you these ideas for distance learning at home. These are ways we can tap into our students' cultures and ensure that language is growing. I know that these slides have been shared with you also, so I'm not going to go through all of these ideas, but they're ways that we can keep engaged with our families and ensure that their culture and traditions are embedded in our distance learning. And I'm going to leave you with this quote. Diversity is the one true thing we all have in common. So we have to celebrate it every day. And I want you to know that I've enjoyed this time with you immensely. And I'd love for you to share with me either something that surprised you or something I made you think about. I've got a few sentence stems here on the screen for you. Or regarding cultural responsive teaching, something you're thinking. You can type it in the chat. And as you're typing, here is my contact information. If any of you'd like to reach out to me, you're welcome to. And finally, this is contact information for Sidelets Education, our Twitter hashtag and Facebook group. We also have a blog and our website. And if you'd like more information on culturally responsive teaching, the author of the book, Pathways to Greatness, Dr. Michelle Izquierdo, has a wonderful full day training and some sessions as well. So you'll have to check those out.
Thank you so much. We have a lot of questions, so we'll have most of our participants will hang on for a few minutes to sit through the Q&A. But as usual, before we get to the official question and answer portion of our time together today, I always like to share what is coming up next week. We have a powerhouse panel presenting to us next week about the role and the power of your school librarian in our new COVID-19 world. Week after week, we do these webinars, and people are always asking, where can I find? And we had that today, Valentina, as you were presenting, they were saying, well, where can I find resources in multiple languages, books in my students' first languages? Sometimes those are hard to find. We don't want to overlook the power of these professionals. A lot of times I don't hear in our conversations where our school librarian is in helping us get situated and helping us roll out the best plans for our students moving forward into this new school year in these strange times. So please join us next week. We are going to talk about how our librarians today, these are not the stodgy librarians of the 1950s and the 1960s. These are digital media specialists, and they work on literacy, they work on digital learning, they work on building community, and these are professionals that we need to hear from during these times. So you will receive an email to register, or you can go to our website, and we will see you Wednesday, August 5th, next week for this conversation about the power of our school librarians during this time. And with that, let's go to question and answer. So Valentina, we had a lot of questions, so I'm trying to, part of what I was doing while you were speaking was I was trying to categorize and cluster these questions so we can sort of hit as many of them as possible. We had multiple questions about what are you using to get those translations on the bottom of your slides? Like, people thought that was incredible. You're on Microsoft something or other that you're using?
Yes, I'm using, and this is actually the first time I've presented using Microsoft PowerPoint. And so it was translating, and I usually would have put English on there, but I think it was set to Serbian. I really wasn't paying attention to that down there at the bottom because I was trying my best to stay focused on the presentation itself, but that is an actual feature on Microsoft, and it is a really nice feature for our English learners as well. And that's one of the reasons I wanted to switch over to Microsoft PowerPoint.
Thank you for sharing that. We had several questions about that, wanting to know, like, what kind of magic that was. So it's PowerPoint. Thank you. And that's just a feature that you can select in PowerPoint then?
Yes,
okay.
yes. Mm-hmm.
Okay, wonderful. So we had another couple of questions around adult ESL and whether or not these sort of culturally responsive techniques and strategies you mentioned, if you see them being applicable to working with adult learners as well.
Oh, absolutely. I think as adults, feeling comfortable in an environment, everything that we discussed is totally applicable to adults and making them feel valued and heard and seen and part of the community for sure.
Thank you. Now let's move to questions around students' names. We had an educator in kind of a sticky situation with a student's name that the student's name, when you pronounce it, is actually a curse word in English. And this poses a problem with, for a variety of reasons. And have you ever seen that before? And any ideas on the best way to handle that? So we're honoring the student's name while kind of limiting any sort of reactions that might be coming from peers, English-speaking peers?
I have seen that before, and one thing that it depends on the age group of the students. So I would not address the I would not address it with the classmates themselves as far as, explaining what that means, or, just in general. But I would speak to the parents and ask them what the child would like to be called. I wouldn't give any of my own ideas towards the family or the kid, because I just don't feel that that's our place. I don't think that that is something that we as educators should impose upon families. I know that we might feel awkward towards it. Now, I know that also in junior high or high school, that can be it can backfire on the child if they're being made fun of because of their name. So it is definitely a sticky situation, but I would not impose my own ideas on what the child should be called. I would definitely talk to the kid depending on their age and the family.
Okay, thank you. Good advice. Let's move on to this idea of punctuality. A lot of people, there were a lot of responses and a lot of different opinions when you ask for people's personal, lens on punctuality. And fair question. So how do you honor a differing view or a differing value on punctuality? How do you get over the sense of disruption to the learning community if and I think a lot of people may share that question, but didn't type it in the chat. But there are lots of comments on punctuality. So, what are your thoughts around that?
The thing is that when we go to a new country and we become part of it, we are going to adapt to their way of life. But we want to honor people for where they're coming from and honor their cultures and traditions. So let's say, for example, a family is consistently late to conferences and meetings and so forth, and we kind of see that trend. That's just, something that is always happening. We may start to feel that that is part of their culture. That's just part of the way that they run their life. It's a normal thing for them. And so realizing that it's not offensive, they're not doing it on purpose, may help us to understand who they are and where they're coming from. And it's not that we're going to say, okay, well, they're always turning in their assignments late, so we're not going to, hold them accountable like the rest of the class. We're just going to be more understanding about their cultural values and the way that they may be brought up, or the way that their lifestyle is a little more relaxed than ours, or the way that they've generally done things before. We're going to be more understanding towards it. Who was I talking to just the other day who told me, I was doing a PD for a district, and she told me about her punctuality and how there was just this family that was always late to everything. And once she realized that, she understood that they were not, doing it on purpose. And it coming from a place of understanding just helps us to connect better with our families.
Thank you. We had a question about students with interrupted formal education and whether or not your ideas would require some modification for that. Stephen asked the question. He said, most of your strategies are still effective, but it can be a real challenge. So any ideas how the approach might be different or a little bit more sustained or something along those lines?
How these approaches might be different for students with interrupted formal education?
Yes, his point was if they're not well versed in their own first language. Your strategies he thinks are still effective, but it can be a real challenge. I think what he's trying to say is maybe to get to know them and communicate with them and try to learn about them. That's how I'm reading that. Stephen, go ahead and chime in if you want to add some clarifying thoughts to your question.
Okay, so when we think about kids who come to us with interrupted education, they still have a lot of experiences. They're coming to us with maybe experiences that we aren't accustomed to, but they are valuable experiences, and maybe some that we didn't even know they have, like perhaps cooking experiences or growing crops or experiences with geography that we didn't know they had. So tapping into the experiences that they have are going to be really important for those kids, because they will feel even more valued than feeling kind of invisible in the classroom, which may be happening for those SIFE kids that have difficulty communicating right away because possibly they're not speaking English yet. So to get to know those things may be a challenge, but we have to use like assistive technology, visuals and pictures and things like that, possibly reaching out to their family once again. It is doable. I've seen a lot of educators do it. I've done it myself as well. And it's well worth it, because once we do that, invest the time in finding out what these kids are coming to us with, and they know how much we care and they feel so special in the classroom, they will bloom much quicker than if we don't invest that time.
Thank you. I have one final question, just because we are running over time a little bit, but as usual, I'm sure you get this all the time. Everybody loves your visuals and your infographics. Is there a specific tool or software that you use to create them that you can share, or is that top secret?
No, it's not top secret. I try to share every single thing that I can, and I use an iPad app called Procreate, and I draw on it. So it's a drawing app called Procreate.
Okay.
It's kind of a weird name, but.
Wow, that's so. Now I have to ask: do you tend to be artistic yourself? They're beautiful, and I, as someone who can't draw at all, I find that very impressive that you can just do that.
You know, I would consider myself mildly artistic.
Well, compared to me, you are way better, but they are beautiful, and I think everybody really responds to them, and yeah, they're very inspiring. And now I want to go get Procreate and try my hand and see if I can come up to close to Valentina's standard of infographics. Okay, well, we are at about 8 minutes after the hour, so we kept you a little bit longer than I thought we would, Valentina, but we had so many great questions. We really do appreciate your time. Everybody, please make sure that you check out Sidelets, and you also check us out, Saddleback, on social media. We're on all the platforms, so Twitter, Facebook, YouTube. We have a YouTube channel, Instagram. So whatever your favorite social media platform is, go check us out there. Go check out Sidelets Consulting and Valentina as well. And we really appreciate you joining us. We hope you join us next week for the Power of Your School Librarian webinar. And as always, thank you for everything you do. We appreciate you, and take care of yourselves so that you are ready to go when the school year starts. Thank you, everybody.